What is the most disturbing thing you've heard a student say? The boy who spoke fire. I'll never forget what one of my students said to me one day. We were having a regular conversation when he suddenly told me he was planning to burn his house down. Just like that. Naturally, I tried to talk him through it. I mentioned how that would destroy the house, how dangerous it would be, and how he or his parents could get seriously hurt. Without missing a beat, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I'd make sure my mom was already dead before I burned it down." He was 8 years old. Let that sink in. Just for context, I'm a special education teacher. I work with kids who deal with emotional disturbances or behavioral challenges. Stuff like this? It's not that rare in my world. Honestly, this isn't even the darkest thing I've heard a kid say, but it stuck with me the most. And before anyone jumps to conclusions, no, I don't believe he was being abused at home. I've known him for years, and he has a pattern of saying really intense, sometimes violent stuff. If I had $1 for every time he told me he wanted to stab or poison someone, well, let's just say I'd finally have enough to actually fund my classroom the way it needs to be. The kid who missed the bus. I remember this one time when a kid missed his bus home and completely lost it. He was having a full-on meltdown. Later on, it came out that his father had told him if he missed the bus again, he would hold his head under water even longer this time. That's what really shook me. To answer some of the questions I keep seeing, yes, the authorities were called in. I do not know the full story of what happened with the kid after that, but I do know he was back at school pretty quickly. When he got to middle school, he ended up moving to a different school district. As someone who works at the school, I have a duty to report if I suspect abuse. Back then, the rules were different. Today, if something like this happened, I would have to call the state abuse hotline right away and then tell my principal. But at the time, since I was not a teacher, my job was just to tell the school nurse or the principal if I thought a kid was being hurt. Luckily, the principal was right there when it happened, so I did not have to make that call myself. The guidance counselor, the social worker, and the school resource officer all got involved fast. By the time I finished my shift, the police were already at the school. If I was not sure the authorities had been contacted, I would have called them myself. But I trusted the principal. She was tough and looked out for every single kid, especially the ones who were going through hard times. If you are hoping this story ends happy, I wish I could say that. I do not know how the kid is doing now. I hope things are better for him. What I do know is that I worked with people who really care about kids and do everything they can to get them help. They manage to help a lot of kids, but sometimes the system just lets some fall through. That is a hard truth. Tyler's cry for help. I worked as an aide in the guidance office for a while. The most disturbing case I saw was a kid I will call Tyler. He had serious trouble fitting in with other kids and often said things that made people uncomfortable. One day, Tyler came into the office wanting to talk to a counselor. I was covering the receptionist desk that day. I told him I would let the counselor know and asked him what was going on. Without much emotion, he said, "I tried to walk out into traffic yesterday." That was really scary to hear, so I took him straight to one of the counselor's offices. He told them the same thing he had told me. But then, the counselor, who I did not like at all, said, "You need to come back later. I am busy working on college admissions for other students." Tyler just sighed and left quietly. It broke my heart. The little boy who believes he's hurt. I have this one student who keeps saying that the adults in the room are hurting him, calling him names, and swearing at him. And he is not joking around. He truly believes these things are happening to him, even though none of it is real. If you try to tell him that nobody is pushing him or using bad words, he looks at you with pure anger and says, "Yes, you did. You pushed me and said the F word." There is no way to convince him otherwise. This student is only 4 years old. A lot of people have asked me questions, so here are some answers. Could it be schizophrenia? Maybe. We do not think that is the case, but we are not experts and have not ruled anything out. Has he gotten help? Not yet. That is what we are trying to fix right now. It has been tough because the family does not have transportation, and because of the COVID-19 pandemic, specialists are not coming into schools like they used to. The family had an appointment, but they missed it and have asked to reschedule. So, we are still waiting on that. Is he having delusions or hallucinations? We do not know for sure. All we can say is that this is how he acts when he gets overwhelmed, and there are likely reasons behind his behavior. When two students knew too much. After school one day, two students came up to me while I was outside watching kids leave the building to go home. These were middle school boys, and at first, I thought they were just joking when they started telling me how cute I was as a baby. I asked them what they meant. One of the boys pulled out his phone and showed me a baby picture of me. Then he told me my home address and the name of my fiancé at the time. The assistant principal was close by, so I called him over and had the boys say everything again. The information they shared was not something you could find quickly with a Google search, and I still have no idea how they got it. To make things worse, one of those boys had a father who was a known leader in a local gang. I was seriously freaked out. The school's response was that kids will be curious and that it was not a big deal. I talked to the police officer who worked at the school, and he told me I had every right to press charges. But less than half an hour later, the assistant superintendent showed up at my classroom door and warned me about how bad it would look on my performance review and on future job opportunities if I decided to do anything about it. I do not work there anymore, but I have never felt more scared or unsettled in my life. Teaching at a girls' school overseas. I taught at a girls' school overseas with students from places like China, the Philippines, India, Nepal, and Pakistan. One day, I walked into my English class and noticed one girl was missing. I asked if she was just absent. Her Pakistani friends looked straight-faced and told me her dad had come to take her away. It was not unusual for these students to leave school if a grandparent or another family member died back home. Sometimes they were gone for a whole month. After class, I was in the administration office when a secretary told me that the girl would not be in my class anymore. The vice principal was nearby and had a strange look on her face. I thought maybe the family was moving back to Pakistan. Later that day, I had the same class again as a substitute teacher. I asked the students about the girl and whether her family had moved away. One of them said, "She is getting married." My eyes got wide, but I kept my cool. I really wanted to say, "She is only barely 13 years old," but I did not. I just said, "Oh, we will miss her. She is a good kid." You could see it in the eyes of the Pakistani, Indian, and even Nepalese girls, like they were used to this kind of thing happening, even though they now lived in a modern Chinese city and some were even born there. After lunch, I talked to the vice principal again. She told me the school could not do anything about it. There was no law to stop a father from taking his daughter out of school. To me, as an American, that felt wrong. I also noticed how the older girls acted differently. The Chinese, Indian, and Filipina girls were more focused on their studies because secondary school and public exams were important to them. But the Pakistani and Nepalese girls seemed less interested. Over time, I learned that many of those girls' lives would be controlled by others. Not all of them, but most. It was a hard thing to see. The kid who threatened to break my other leg. When I was student teaching elementary art, I had just had knee surgery, so I was on crutches. One day, we were working with clay, and I was standing close to this one kid who was acting really violent. The kids were using rolling pins to roll out slabs of clay, and this kid kept hitting other kids with his rolling pin. I kept trying to protect the other kids and get the rolling pin away from him. Then, the kid tried to throw the rolling pin. Honestly, I caught it right out of the air. I was trying to put some distance between us and scold him. That's when the kid turned to me and yelled, "Bitch, I will break your other leg," and then kicked my bad leg. The kid was only 7 years old. A lot of people have said they would have just kicked the kid. I get it, but really, it is not the kid's fault. It is the world around him that failed, his parents, his family, society. Most likely, this kid will become one of the many young African American males who end up as a statistic. They are often seen as a threat, no matter what, but when you add years of violence and learned confrontation, it is a tough fight for them. It is hard to help kids you only see at school or, like in my case, only once a week. This is a sad situation that needs to be fixed on a bigger level. Vote for people who actually care about others. For those worried about my leg, the kid only kicked it half-heartedly. He knew he messed up by threatening and attacking an adult. Honestly, I think he was more surprised that I didn't beat him up for what he said. The girl who did not want to go home for Christmas. I had a young girl in 5th grade who asked me if she could come home with me for Christmas. She said she did not want to be at her own house during the break. We already knew her home life was rough because her parents were involved in a gang. I tried my best to comfort her, telling her that everything would be okay and that we cared about her. I also told her that her family loved her in their own way. She looked at me and said, "If they love me, then why do they hit me?" Thankfully, not long after that, we were able to get her out of that situation. Every Christmas, I think about her and hope she is doing okay. I still get chills when I think about what might have happened if she had not been taken away. The stories we heard about what was really going on were horrifying. The preschooler with violent behavior. When I was student teaching in a preschool classroom with 3-year-olds, there was one kid who was well known for being violent. We had taken out anything in the classroom that he could possibly use as a weapon. One day, this kid grabbed a classmate from behind, wrapped his arm around him, then pulled out a puzzle piece shaped kind of like a knife from behind his back. Without any emotion in his voice, he acted out slitting the other kid's throat and said, "You are dead. I killed you. I will kill all of you." It was creepy and scary. This same kid threw some of the most intense tantrums you could imagine. He would flip or throw furniture, break anything he could reach, and even build barricades out of the classroom furniture and shelves. Usually, we tried to get the other kids out of the room during those fits and just stayed safe, waiting for him to calm down. After one especially wild tantrum, he finally got tired and quiet. As I helped him out of his little corner fortress, I told him the other kids were outside playing, but before he could join them, he would have to help clean up the mess he made. He looked around the wrecked classroom with wide eyes and asked, sounding honestly surprised, "I did that? Are you sure?" Later, when I was teaching in another state, there was a 3-year-old boy with developmental delays and bruises. He told me angrily, "Mommy hit me. Mommy kicked me. Tummy hurt. Ow, no. I not bad." Child Protective Services had just recently sent him back to his mom's care. They did not like how often I called or criticized their work, or lack of it. This boy also acted out like he was locked in a closet when Daddy was around. We do not know who his father really was, but we think Daddy might have been one of his mom's different clients. The superintendent who understood. Can I share my story too? Mine is a little different because I was the student. The teacher, or actually the superintendent, said something that really stuck with me and I will never forget it. I went to a very small school, and in 9th grade, we had an art teacher named Mr. Pena. He got along with a lot of students and even had an art club that I would sometimes go to after school. He taught me a lot about drawing and other art stuff. His brother was the superintendent, also named Mr. Pena. Mr. Pena, the art teacher, quit during my 10th grade year, and then in the middle of my 11th grade year, he sadly took his own life. It shocked everyone. That same 11th grade year, we had a new physics teacher who was a cool person to talk to, but no one liked how he taught. He just told us to read the book and never really helped us understand anything. Then he would get mad at us for not getting it. At the same time, my abusive grandfather had back surgery and started acting toxic toward everyone because he was bored and depressed. One day, I finally had enough of my physics teacher's nonsense. I was holding myself together but ready to break down. I went to the superintendent after he finished teaching math. He pulled me aside and asked what was wrong. I let it all out, everything about my physics teacher and how I felt. I told him I looked okay but was not really fine. Then he looked me in the eyes and said, "You know, my brother told me that too." That broke me. I cried like never before. He listened to me, let me skip my next class, and took me to the library with a snack from the cafeteria. When it was physics time, he even went to the class to watch what the teacher was doing. I hope he is doing well. In my last year of high school, I went to theater with his daughter. He was there to see me graduate too. The boy who robbed another kid. I work with at-risk youth. Most of my students are amazing people, like 99% of the time. But sometimes life throws some serious challenges their way, and it can mess up their whole future. One of my best students was only in my class because of a court order. It was either my class or going straight from juvenile detention to prison. This kid was 16 years old, smart, curious, respectful, and creative. But he had robbed an 11-year-old kid at gunpoint while riding on the back of a bicycle. He did it because his friend wanted the money. This boy had a real talent for science, so I helped him graduate with a strong interest in astronomy. But, man, I had to sit down after that shift and think hard about how different his life could have been if not for a really, really lenient judge. Also, one day in class, his friend, who was also at risk and there by court order for dealing opiates at the high school, just happened to ask about aliens. That moment sparked something for the kid, and it helped him stay on track. Good luck, young man. I am always rooting for you. The girl with bruises in gymnastics. I used to teach gymnastics to kids around 5 to 8 years old. There was one student, about 6 years old, who always came in with bruises and marks. It was strange because she never seemed to get hurt or fall during practice when I was watching. Gymnastics is a sport where you have to keep a close eye on kids, and you often have to catch them when they almost fall or grab them to keep them from getting hurt, especially on things like the balance beam or the trampoline. One day, that same girl was up on the beam and slipped with her foot. When I reached to catch her, I ended up grabbing near her private area. As a coach, I felt I needed to apologize because that can happen sometimes. I said sorry and moved on. But then she said, "It's okay, it already hurts because of Daddy." That hit me hard. Another coach nearby heard it too. I asked her to take over for a moment so I could take a walk with the girl. We went to the head coach's office, and I asked the girl to say again what she had told me. The head coach took over from there and asked me to go back to my class. I just had a really bad feeling. The little girl ended up telling the head coach much more, things even worse than what she told me. It broke my heart. Child Protective Services was called, but I never found out exactly what happened after that. The girl was taken out of the class, and I never saw her again. I hope she is okay somewhere out there. I never told anyone at the time because it felt like I was breaking her trust. But it feels better to share it anonymously now. My heart goes out to anyone who has to go through anything like that. I quit that job soon after. I just could not stop thinking about it and it really affected me. My friend and Amber. I am not a teacher, but when I was in 8th grade, my best friend at the time was getting bullied by pretty much everyone. Except me, she meant the world to me. We lived in a small town that was not very nice. One day in science class, things blew up. My friend had finally had enough. There was this girl named Amber. She was actually kind of cool, but she hung out with the bullies and sometimes bullied others herself. That day, Amber really ticked off my friend. My friend said, "You know what? I don't care what you say. I'm going to grow up and be successful while you end up with nothing and die in this town." The next year, freshman year, Amber was crossing the street and got hit by a drunk driver. She was left in a vegetable state, and her family decided to take her off life support. It was awful. I didn't think Amber was a terrible person. I even went to her wake. That was the first time I ever saw a dead body. Amber and I had grown up together in that small town. I remember she once told me she wanted to work in mental health and take care of sick people. I think she was just a kid who got caught up with the wrong crowd, but she did bring joy to a lot of people. For a long time, I wished it had been the real bullies who got hurt instead of Amber. That day in science class always stuck with me because my friend was right, she really did become successful. Years later, as an adult, I ran into that same friend in a restaurant bathroom. I didn't even recognize her at first. She was beautiful, always had been. She was working as a model and traveled a lot. She even gave me her business card. When we hung out, I had a great time. She lived in a huge house and was living the life she dreamed of. One day, she just stopped talking to me. I wish she would reach out because I always thought of her as a sister. Anyway, she was right. And for some reason, I still think about Amber a lot. I can't stop thinking about how our lives turned out and how I knew her as a kid. My first teaching experience and the relief teacher. I am a trainee teacher, in my first year, and had my first real teaching experience in the second semester of the year. I was placed at a school in a low-income area. The students there faced all kinds of challenges, behavior problems, learning difficulties, financial struggles, plus many who spoke English as a second language or were indigenous. I was teaching a fourth-grade class. These kids were living through some of the hardest times, but they were all amazing kids. This kind of environment was not new to me because I grew up in similar low-income areas. The way the school handled the students' needs was fantastic. They used new teaching skills and ideas I was learning about, and even in the toughest moments, the kids were still seen and treated like kids, cared for as such. Then came the last day of my placement, and my supervisor was out sick. It was supposed to be no big deal because I got to see how a relief teacher worked, and after almost 10 weeks with these kids, I could help the relief teacher manage the class. But that day ended with me crying. This relief teacher was from a different time, one who believed in strict control. I won't go into everything she did, but here are some things that really stood out. A student said to me, "I wish I could hurt myself so my mom could pick me up and I could go home." I made sure to handle it carefully and make sure the student was okay. On their small whiteboards for spelling practice, some kids wrote "I want to die" over and over. Staff and I addressed it, and those students were okay too. Some students who liked me but never really came to me before stayed glued to my side all day. Kids begged me to take the class, even though they knew I was still learning. The relief teacher banned kids from going to the bathroom during class. When I let them go, they got punished. I saw those students being humiliated and threatened with expulsion just for fidgeting during morning roll call. I broke down crying on a Zoom call with my course lecturer and classmates because nothing I did seemed to protect the kids. Finally, I got up the courage to talk to the school about what was happening. It felt scary, going up against a more experienced teacher as a new teacher, but another teacher supported me and said the bad energy in the room was hurting the kids. The school decided that relief teacher would never come back to that class. That moment cemented my decision to be a teacher. These were the kinds of teachers I had growing up, the ones who made me feel worthless. I refused to let kids have to go through that again. The evil girl in the bathroom. About 40 years ago, before I got my teaching certification, I worked as a school aide. Aides have no real power. We were not supposed to discipline or teach. Our job was to watch, help, and report. There was one evil student I will never forget. I was supervising kids washing their hands before lunch. I have never done this duty at any other school since. There was a history behind what happened next, but no one warned me or told me anything. They only said to watch. One by one, the kids washed their hands and left the bathroom. No problems. But 2 girls stayed behind. One was a small, anxious mixed-race girl about 7 or 8 years old. The other was a bigger, older white girl, around 8 or 9. The little girl was waiting her turn at the sink. This was the 1970s in a small town in America. Back then, I didn't understand how much the older girl could bully and hurt others. She was very good at hiding it. The older girl, named Damianette, was washing her hands very slowly and dramatically, like she was putting on a show. She turned, looked the anxious girl right in the eyes, and said in a low, smooth voice, "See how clean my hands are? You can wash and wash, but you will never be clean. You will always be black." Then she walked away. I was stunned. I had never seen such cruelty come from a child before. The damage was done. After Damianette left, the anxious girl and I just looked at each other, me with my mouth open, her with sad, big eyes. I wanted to chase down the other girl, but the girl in front of me needed me more. I hugged her, showed her love, and explained that Damianette was wrong and ignorant, probably because her parents were mean. I told her Damianette would be punished. I spent as much time as I could with that anxious girl the rest of the day. I usually spent a lot of time with her anyway. I reported what happened to her parents, teachers, and other staff. They told me the problem was taken care of, but as an aide, I didn't get to know what happened next. Later, they told me I was there to watch both the shy girl and the bully. I wish they had told me that from the start. Now I think they wanted an independent report from someone who wasn't a regular at the school to help get rid of the bully, paperwork and witnesses. I still think about Damianette and that anxious girl often. I was 18 then, with little training or experience. Over the years, I wondered how much of the anxiety came from their loud, strict, and obnoxious white mother. The kids knew too much about sex and drugs for their age. They played sexualized games with dolls, and I reported that too. That little girl didn't need that kind of mother or a bully like Damianette making her life worse. I have never hated a child before. But I hated Damianette. I'm pretty sure she ended up working on Donald Trump's campaign staff.